Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining this breakout session. And thank you again for joining the LAEDC's Economic Forecast. My name is Mike Smith. I'm the Director of International Trade at the World Trade Center Los Angeles, a subsidiary of the LAEDC. The goal at WTCLA is to attract international investment to LA, as well as promote international opportunities for companies locally looking to go abroad. I'm very excited to bring this discussion to you today, and we have a great panel of experts to talk more about exports. We know that economic development has a number of tools in its arsenal, and exports sometimes is one that's a bit overlooked, but one that can be quite powerful. And so as we rethink economic recovery and we rethink equity and inclusion, I really think that exports can be a tool to help us all recover. Before we begin our panel today, I want to kind of provide a foothold for the conversation when it comes to this equity and exports panel. I want to provide kind of three perspectives before we begin. The first is the Biden administration and some of their policies regarding small-owned businesses owned by entrepreneurs of color. The second is what one ethnic chamber is doing to try to encourage exports. And lastly, to provide some data to understand where we are currently when it comes to entrepreneurs of color that are exporting, as well as the economic effects of those companies that do export. So first, the momentum behind the Biden administration when it comes to entrepreneurs of color is momentous. One of the policy recommendations they have is to encourage hundreds of billions of dollars in federal funding to go to Black and brown businesses located in disadvantaged areas. Exports being an important piece of economic development, that money could be funded for some of the programs that we see locally. Additionally, the administration is looking to encourage U.S. construction companies that are currently constructing U.S. government projects abroad to strategize ways to create pathways for entrepreneurs of color in those contracts. This would naturally create a pathway for those companies to export their goods and services outside of the United States. And lastly, the Biden administration is looking to instruct the Export-Import Bank to increase small business financing and develop targets for the percent of authorized value its transactions are going to entrepreneurs of color. Moving away from the Biden administration, we can look at what one ethnic chamber is proposing for its members. The U.S. Black Chamber every year publishes something called the Black Print, where it outlines its ideas and strategies for its chambers all across the country. Exports actually commits a couple pages worth within that strategic document. They're looking to increase technical assistance and outreach for Black-owned businesses around the United States to encourage exporting. They additionally enumerate ways to use existing MOUs and leveraging new MOUs in international markets for their member companies. But lastly, data is going to be super helpful in understanding the impact of exporting and the impact that entrepreneurs of color can have on their businesses when they export. The most recent study that I could find goes back to a 2013 report by the Minority Business Development Agency, and it uses data from 2007 and 2011. So it's been about 10 years or so since we have some real good data to understand how entrepreneurs of color export and what those economic effects are when they do. But their findings were quite interesting. One of them was that minority-owned businesses who export account for a larger percentage of their receipts when compared to non-minority-owned businesses who export. It's about 14% to 5%. So those that do export, those entrepreneurs of color, enjoy a larger share of their sales going to exporting activities. We know that can increase to diverse sales channels as well as resiliency in their businesses should economic shocks hit. Secondly, those entrepreneurs of color who export are larger when it comes to employees than non-exporting entrepreneurs of color. About 3 times actually. On average, 21 employees are employed by those businesses who do export. Lastly, and I think most interestingly, entrepreneurs of color are twice as likely to export, 3 times as likely to already have international operations, and 6 times as likely to transact business in a language other than English. So these operational factors strategically position minority-owned businesses to be successful exporters, which is why today we want to discuss about how we can increase and empower those companies to export. I hope that provides a brief foothold or a small foothold for us to kind of jump off from. In our panel today, we have a number of experts. First, Lily Rocha, who is the CEO of the Latino Restaurant Association and who has a lot of exporting experience herself to Latin America, helping companies in the agriculture sector reach those markets. Secondly, we have Terry Batch, who is a senior trade specialist U.S. Commercial Service here in Los Angeles. We also have Dan Su, who leads the Minority Business Development Agency's LA activities, as well as sits on the Inland Empire's District Export Council. And finally, we have Christine Peterson, who's the Director of Trade and Investment for the City of Los Angeles. Thank you all so much for joining. Let's jump right in. Or before we do, if you guys see on the right-hand side, we have a question and answer area or section. So if there are any questions that you may have while our conversation unfolds, please feel free to add those in the chat. So let's start with you, Terry. I think some people have a general sense of U.S. Commercial Service, maybe what they do at a very high level, but can you share more about what those activities are? And then specifically in Los Angeles, how are you working with some of the companies we talked about?
So just for those that are in the audience that might not be familiar with the U.S. Commercial Service, the U.S. Commercial Service is a part of the U.S. Department of Commerce. It's a federal government agency, and we have offices throughout the U.S. So pretty much every major city, we have more than 100 offices, and also in our embassies and consulates around the world. So every major trading partner of the U.S. has a U.S. Commercial Service office in it, and it is to assist U.S. businesses with doing business in that market. We have 4 areas of competency that we focus on, and the one that I'm going to talk about most today is export promotion. So that's what we're known for. That's what the business community knows us for. But we also do commercial diplomacy, and then we also do investment promotion as well, where we're targeting foreign direct investment into the U.S. Just to give you a picture of our presence in Southern California, we have 2 offices in Los Angeles. We have one office that's co-located with the LAEDC, which is a very strong partner of ours. And then we have an office in West Los Angeles. I sit in the West LA office. We also have an office in Orange County in Irvine. We have an office in the Inland Empire in Ontario. We have a Ventura office and also San Diego. So the Southern California region is very well represented, and we have a lot of activities that we do just locally to help and partnering with the business community. And we work with partners across the board, whether it's the ports or the mayor's office. Christine is a very strong partner of ours, the business community, various trade associations and groups. And our goal is to increase exports. And also our sweet spot is small and medium-sized exports. So just to give you a flavor of what we do have a newsletter that we send out to exporters. We try to do that regularly to provide updates on what's happening in international trade, whether it's by market or by industry sector. But we also have virtual services that we've been offering during this COVID period. So some of the things that we're best known for, people know us for the Gold Key service, where when they're getting ready to go to a country, they can contact us and we would set up meetings for them to meet with potential distributors or potential business partners. Obviously, in this climate, we can't do that, but we do it virtually. So we have something called an International Partner Search, and it can be done virtually, where our offices overseas, they're still out finding partners and finding leads for companies. And then we set it up by video conference where you can meet with potential distributors. And it actually has been quite successful for a lot of our companies. We also can still help you do due diligence. So if you're receiving inquiries from overseas and you're not quite sure what to do with them, or if they're legitimate companies, we can help check those companies out for you. And I always recommend to my clients, if you're getting those types of inquiries, don't sign a contract until you know who you're dealing with. We're continuing to do our conferences. People in the business community know us from our Discover Global Markets series. We did that virtually, where we focused on advanced manufacturing back in September. I believe it was September. And we also did a Women's Global Trade Empowerment Forum. It was a series of sessions that we did promoting exporting amongst women-owned businesses. We're continuing to do coffee chats. We have a series on Africa that we're in the midst of. We have one coming up for Ethiopia. We just completed one with Kenya, and we're doing ones also for like textile and apparel industry in the EU. A lot of those are coming up. And then I also just want to mention very quickly, we are continuing to plan trade missions. We do have some upcoming trade missions And that some are moving virtually, but we're still planning in-person trade missions. The Caribbean region is one that we're focusing on, and that includes the Bahamas, Barbados, Eastern Caribbean, Dominican Republic, Guyana, Haiti, Jamaica, Suriname, Trinidad, and Tobago. So that's a region that our teams are focusing on very closely. And we're also working on an infrastructure summit in the UAE and Saudi, which I believe it was going to be in person, but we've moved it as virtually. And then lastly, I just want to mention our digital strategy webinars. We're doing a lot of focus on e-commerce. A lot of companies during this time have been selling online. So we want to help companies get up to speed and have the tools that they need for their websites. We've had a focus on Native and rural and Native American companies, and that we're in the midst of that series. And then we also have an e-commerce innovation lab with a lot of videos and recorded webinars to just help companies get up to speed and have the tools that they need to be able to sell to overseas customers. With that, I'm going to end it. But there's a lot happening even during this time. And we want to make sure we're getting that message out that it is still possible to export. It's still possible to find new clients and new customers overseas, and that the U.S. Commercial Service is a vital resource that you can use to help you grow your business.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, that's great to hear, Terry, especially the focus on women.
Yes.
It's really, really encouraging. And personally, I've seen the Gold Key service in action, and I can say bar none, it is one of the best services out there for the money,
Yes.
which is very excellent.
Yes.
Lily, let's go to you. I know you wear a lot of hats, president or CEO of the Latino Restaurant Association. You've done trade shows. You've helped exporters go to Latin America. What are some of the things that you're seeing with that kind of Latinx group and those businesses that are going international?
Yeah, thank you so much, Mike. You see some of the challenges that we see, and sorry, going back, I've been in the trade show industry for over 15 years. And like Terry said, there's so many resources that definitely need to be taken advantage of. Some of those challenges that I see with Latinx community are some of the typical and traditional barriers that we've seen during the pandemic. I mean, those existed prior to the pandemic, but with the pandemic, we've seen those problems compounded. So, issues with financing, issues with not being technically, just even, just the basics with technology and things like that. What we see as well is that, sometimes some of our clients, some people who want to export and even import, but we're talking about export here. So not being prepared with regard to doing data research on the areas that they want to penetrate. There's just so much information and education that I recommend that people do prior to any kind of venture like this. There's a lot of like Terry was saying, there's so many government help that can be used, and it's vital that people go there. I deal a lot with governments from other countries, so a lot of my experience is dealing with foreign governments and some of the help that they give to some of their people. But in turn, we also have that help. And I think now with some of the things that you're saying regarding the Biden administration, providing assistance to people of color, women, I think we're going to see a lot of that changing, but being aware of the geography, because obviously, some people say, hey, I want to sell in Latin America, but Latin America it's a huge region of, vastly different in so many ways. And so doing that, doing your due diligence and learning about the different countries, the different trends, I mean, it's very, very different language. There's different regulatory information that you need to be aware of with regard to where you're going to try to export to. So a lot of education with regard to that is, what I highly recommend. We are a nonprofit, so I also belong to the Latino Food Industry Association. Association. I'm on their board, so I welcome anyone who has any questions. We're happy to help. And I know that I'm going to be partnering with Terry and her group a lot more. With regard to the Restaurant Association, obviously that's a little bit different, but we do help a lot of people within the scope of the Latino Food Industry Association. So yeah, that's some of the things that I've been seeing. Again, best practices for people: do your research, make sure that you know about intellectual property concerns. There's a lot of legal, just not just the basics, but you really need to get involved with whatever your product is, whatever it is that you're trying to export. There's a lot of regulation around different things. You've got to know what countries you're dealing with, what those regulations are. So there's so much. So I, again, welcome any questions. Anybody who wants to contact me directly, please do so at the Latino Restaurant Association, because like I said, I can put you in touch with people at the Latino Food Industry Association. We're also working with all people of color, all people basically. So it's not just the Latino restaurant for Latinos, but we're working with everyone. So
sure. Yeah, I'm hearing, technical capabilities across the board, the market research, fundamental. And then the extra layer of complexity with some of the work that you've done is the food, right? I mean, the standards of food and exporting is probably more complex than some other products. So reaching out with those resources sounds like it'd be quite helpful. How about you, Daniel, at the Minority Business Development Agency, obviously working here in Los Angeles with, I'm sure, a number of diverse businesses. What are you guys seeing with the market here? What are you guys excited about going forward with the administration?
Well, at MBDA, we typically follow the direction of the current administration, and for the past two administrations, they've been really pushing towards exports. So what we do, we're 36 centers throughout the U.S. There's three export centers focusing on the African continent, Central South America, and also Asia. That's manufacturing and Native American. And so what we are doing here, because Southern California, we're in a sense gateway to South America, Central America, and Asia. We are trying to facilitate transactions, assist clients who are trying to export to those regions by tying into the resources throughout the U.S. through our other centers and our connections within the government, and then making those ties so they can make the connections to the products that they want to sell overseas. And in fact, we also are building relations with various local consulates where we have relations to them and their people in their country, the opportunities, what they're looking for, and then we try to facilitate transactions that way. We also are working with the investors who are wanting to come into the U.S. to invest, as well as trying to break into overseas construction projects and development to provide those opportunities for the U.S. contractors to go overseas and participate in international construction. That's been an area which is very difficult for contractors over here to want to go over there because they don't know the land, they don't have any connections. And so we're trying to actually put together those deals so then they can get their feet wet, and they're not trying to do it all themselves. We're trying to make those things happen. And of course, as you know, as minorities, a lot of us have the language skills, understanding of the country, understanding of the customs, and of course the regulatory, the way the government works. So, in a sense, we have a lot of our clients have a foot up because of just of where they grew up and understanding the culture. So, if a company is looking to expand their revenue base or diversify their income, definitely exporting is a way to go. We do one-on-one to medium large size businesses as far as consulting, helping them make those connections and facilitate their growth. So We are in Pasadena, open to whoever is interested in exporting and just growing your business in general. So please look us up, and we can try to help you in whatever way we can.
Absolutely. We'll definitely share everyone's information, because I know there's a lot of resource between all of you. We want to make sure people can take advantage of that. But I'm glad you mentioned the consulates. That's something that we often discuss, of just having a very strong concentration of consulates here in Los Angeles, which can really provide that extra introduction or that extra point to help our companies be successful. So I'm glad you guys see that at the MBEDA as well. Christine, we have a few minutes left. I know the city of Los Angeles and the mayor has been at the forefront of some of these equitable and inclusion issues since last summer. How is that going into your work at the Mayor's Office of International Affairs?
Yeah, well, thanks, Michael, for that question, and just thanks to LAEDC for including this topic today. And what I understand will be included in future events too. It's very much in line with the mayor's priorities and the mayor's mission. Our mission in the International Affairs Office is to really build up and leverage the global strengths of Los Angeles to deliver jobs for Angelenos, revenue to the city, and broad economic opportunity. And we know COVID has hit exports really hard. Goods exports from the LA metro area are down 22%. Or more than $10 billion in 2020, the first 3 quarters of 2020. So that's $10 billion of less revenue, less sales. So this year, we're really focusing on building back that trade and investment with an emphasis on equity and sustainability that informs all of the work from the mayor's office. As you've said, minority businesses have shown to have a really strong competitive advantage in international business because of multilingual skills, cultural affinities, and close ties with other countries. And so, minority businesses that are exporting already do well once they're out there. We just need to get more of them out there, especially smaller businesses. So a focus on minority businesses and exports is not only good for equity, but it's also good for the economy. So the mayor on June 19th or Juneteenth this year, he released the Executive Directive 27, which is about studying and promoting racial equity in city departments. He designated Brenda Shockley to be our city's first chief equity officer. All city departments have now developed racial equity action plans. So we're really looking at all of our city services and programming through a racial equity lens. And in the Office of International Affairs, we're focused on improving access to export support through the LA Business Portal, working with the Economic and Workforce Development Department's 9 business source centers across the city. And we're also focusing on new markets that are of interest. We've never done a trade mission to Africa, and this will be the first year. We're doing a virtual trade mission to Kenya with the support of the World Trade Center, of course, so that's great. And we're focusing also on lowering barriers to entry, and one of the ways to do that is through digital and virtual, less costs associated with that. Some of my colleagues in the Office of International Affairs also just launched a international network of cities focused on gender equity. That's called Change, and it was launched with Barcelona, Freetown, London, Mexico City, and Tokyo. So those are a couple of the things that we're doing. I'm happy to continue the conversation.
Well, that's excellent, and we're definitely excited about that trade mission to Kenya coming this spring. We can share more information about that with anyone interested. Well, that was quick. I know 30 minutes goes by quick in a conversation like this, so just wanted to thank you all again for being here and providing your great insights.